Section 377 of India's Penal Code made gay sex illegal and imposed a potential penalty of life imprisonment. A year ago, my next guests were the chief lawyers arguing against that law in India's Supreme Court. Weeks later, it was struck down. India's Chief Justice said in his statement, criminalizing carnal intercourse is irrational, indefensible, and manifestly arbitrary. Section 377 had been on the books since 1861, a relic of India's British colonial era. Similar laws still exist in many countries, some former colonies, others not. Indeed, the International Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Trans, and Intersex Association says almost 70 countries have laws that punish same-sex relations. Lawyers Menaka, Guruswamy, and Arundhanti Katju, congratulations on your victory in India, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So to me, what's even more striking is 2013, the same Indian Supreme Court had upheld the sodomy laws. How did you get the same court to reverse itself?
Right. So I think 2013 was, as you can well imagine, extremely difficult. It's one thing to have an old colonial era sodomy law. It's another thing to have that law being upheld by your court in contemporary times. But there was a point in those hearings, it was a month-long hearing, Fareed. There's a point in those hearings where the senior judge says, looks at the law officer and says, well, do you know any homosexuals? And the law officer laughs, chuckles aloud, and said, no, my lord, I'm not that modern. And for all of us, I think it was very clear at that point that we were going to lose because the judge had no imagination of who is a gay Indian. I think from there on, we decided that we would never again let LGBT Indians be invisible in any courtroom, starting with that courtroom. So when we went back to court in 2016, we took real live LGBT Indians who are just like everyone else.
And you chose the cases, you chose the case and the litigants carefully, right?
Well, in 2014 and 15 and 16, when we were putting this case together, LGBT people were not exactly falling over themselves to say that they were criminals with a Supreme Court that had just upheld the law in 2013. So these were the people who agreed to come forward. It wasn't like we had a wide pool of people wanting to put their names to this. So I think those first 5 petitioners, it was really an act of bravery and courage on their part because they agreed to do this on the back of a loss and on the back of a Supreme Court having just said that LGBT people would be criminalized and could be prosecuted under 377.
There was a classical dancer, right?
Yeah, so Navtej Singh Johar, who this case is named for, the lead petitioner in the 2016 petition, is a classical Indian dancer. I mean, he is as quintessentially Indian as you can be. A Sikh Indian who's a Bharatnatyam dancer.
Bharatnatyam is like it would be like doing classical music.
The most classical of all dancers. So really just kind of speaks so much to who is queer in India and what is being Indian.
Kenya just recently ruled in favor, effectively, of the sodomy laws that you were able to get overturned in India. Botswana, on the other hand, went the Indian way, in fact, citing your court decision.
Right.
What do you think? Do you have hope that this movement is going to keep building?
I do, and I think the Indian Supreme Court judgment plays a big part of that because many of these former colonies have sodomy laws because of our shared history of British colonialism. And I think after the Supreme Court judgment came, you've seen activists in Malaysia and Sri Lanka now looking at how they can use this judgment to overturn their own laws. Singapore, there have been challenges filed about a year ago now. So there is definitely this movement. And I think it makes a difference when you have a court in the global south that relies on its own constitution, that looks to its own jurisprudence. And it makes a difference within constitutional courts around the world, that they're not just looking to courts from the West and America, Canada, the UK, but also looking to India.
I'd ask you about the human impact of this decision, but in a sense, it's personal because you guys are not just, you didn't just argue the case together, you're also a couple yourselves.
Sure. You know,
That's right.
I mean, that's right. You know, the loss in 2013 was, you know, a loss as lawyers, as a loss as citizens. It was a personal loss. It is not nice to be a criminal who has to go back to court as a lawyer to argue other cases. It is a deeply personal loss. I think for queer folks in all these post-colonial countries, I think our governments have to have a sense that these are not our laws. These were never our cultures. And why have we not been more proactive in bringing forth law reform and expanding freedom? Surely independence and decolonization must mean that.
What did it mean to you personally?
It was very difficult. We had a court where we practiced, where we were both lawyers at the Supreme Court, and this court had just said that gay people were second-class citizens.
We really felt that, you know, this law had to be overturned.
How did you celebrate when it actually happened, when it did get overturned?
You know, but one of the things that meant the most to me was that my parents came to court the day the judgment was pronounced. So, you know, we met them the evening before, and my mom had been wanting to come to court for a long time just to kind of see us in action. And then they were there, and it really means a lot because Justice Indu Malhotra also says in her judgment that history owes an apology to LGBT people and their families. So I think, you know, one of the most meaningful things for me was that we were all together after the judgment came out.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.